Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing a little bit of yard work, but I figured I'd take a break to talk about crankbaits for the spawn. Now that's kind of something that you're not going to hear me talk about a lot, because crankbaits generally aren't the best bait to use during the spawn. Now the pre-spawn and the post-spawn and summertime, all completely different deals. But when the fish are on the bed, generally, soft plastics, wacky rigs, Texas rigs, those sort of things are going to be your best bet. But I've had a lot of success with crankbaits during the spawn when the fish are on the beds. And really the situation where you might want to reach for a crankbait is when the fish are spawning on hard bottoms, not a lot of vegetation, when maybe it's just occasional like stump or random piece of wood that these fish are creating their beds next to, and you're looking to get a reaction strike. A lot of times they're fish that you can't physically see, but you know that they're in the area. Maybe you can see the stumps or the debris on your 360 or forward-facing sonar, and you're trying to get a reaction bite out of these fish. And generally speaking, when you can't see a fish on the bed, usually those fish are a little more prone to being a little bit more reactive and striking at a bait. And the great thing about a crankbait this time of year is that most of the time when a fish is on the bed, they're not looking to eat something, but rather just react to it, maybe swipe at it to scare it away from its bed and just kind of protect the perimeter of the bed. And so a crankbait is great for this, because a lot of baits, those fish will miss those baits because they're just trying to swipe and scare the bait fish as opposed to eat it. But a crankbait, because you got two nice big treble hooks on there, is really good for being able to really get those fish hooked. Maybe it's outside the mouth or barely inside the mouth, but obviously in tournaments you can't snag fish, but you can fish around beds if you can't physically see them. And a crankbait is just a really good way to get some hooks in those fish that are otherwise striking at the bait. And it allows you to cover a ton of water when you aren't necessarily looking for visible fish. So here are a couple of crankbait choices that really kind of are the only ones that I generally fish when I'm targeting fish that I think are on the bed. The very first one is going to be a square bill or a shallow diving crankbait, like a Strike King 1.5, 2.5. If you're looking to imitate bigger bait fish, all those different RC 1.5, those type of baits are going to be my number one choice. Now these are perfect because they really operate in the depth zone that these fish are going to be congregating in. So they're going to be working that 2 to 5 foot range really well, actually more like 3 to 5 foot range. 2 foot, yeah, you can manipulate the depth that these run by running heavier line, but generally speaking, 3 to 5 foot, these are great baits to be throwing for spawning fish, especially because they deflect off of cover. This square, kind of squared off bill here does wonders for deflecting off of cover, which makes it really good at being fairly weedless. Not weedless, but I would call it woodless, because you're really just trying to not snag as much on stumps and laydowns and things like that. And these do a pretty good job. But not only do they do a good job at deflecting because you're trying to get the bait through the cover without snagging that much, which they still do snag quite a bit, but also that deflecting motion really gets a lot of strikes from bass, especially when they're on the bed. So the 2.5 or 1.5, really good for if you're just trying to cover water, hard bottom. Maybe it's a bank that is a fairly decent taper. Maybe it's not quite 45 degrees, but you're really working the first 10 foot of the bank. Okay, and then at past 10 feet, it gets too deep for this to really work, and it's too deep for the fish to really make their beds. So 3 to 5 feet effectively is what I'm going to be looking at with these, and usually those banks that have a fair taper to them where those fish are spawning. The next bait or category of crankbait that I really like to reach for this time of year when the fish are spawning is for a situation where you've got a very, very shallow flat. Okay, so the fish are spawning on the shallow flat. Maybe there's some sparse vegetation. Maybe there's lily pads, you know, a very sparse lily pads, that sort of thing. There's definitely not a fast taper to the shoreline, to the contours. It's just a very consistent, maybe like 1 or 2 foot. Perfect for a lot of those shallow natural fisheries where those fish are going to be spawning on these very, very shallow flats. And that is a wake bait. Okay, so a wake bait like this is the Arashi wake crank. This one's a good one. And I also like, this one's an old school choice, but this one is probably my all-time favorite wake bait, and that is the Subwort from Storm. So this one's a really good one. And really what these do really well is they allow you to cover very, very shallow water. They don't dive very deep at all. Generally, they're actually waking right below the surface, so you can actually see the wake. And they do a really good job, just like the 1.5 or 2.5, at imitating bluegill. Okay, and that's a key point that I want to kind of wrap this up with, is that both of these crankbaits do an exceptional job at imitating bluegill. And bluegill by far is the nemesis, the #1 nemesis of bass during the spawn. Bluegill are constantly pestering bass that are on the bed, and that's why they get really aggravated and they're willing to you know, viciously strike a crankbait like these, because if they think they're bluegill, they've constantly all day long been berated by them, and constantly have to chase them off the bed before they start eating their eggs. So a crankbait does a really, really good job at imitating these bluegill, and that's why you get such good strikes. So as far as the colors that I choose, I really like to choose baits that look like bluegill or even golden shiner sometimes, like this one right here. So colors like these, they are absolute killers, during the spawn because of that bluegill imitation. As far as the tackle that I'm going to be using for both of these, let's start with the 1.5 and the 2.5s. All right, as far as the rod, they're going to be exactly the same for both of them. I like using the Brian Thrift square bill rod. That's a medium heavy rod, and I really like that one for fishing both of these. Then I'm also going to be using a 6.6 to 1 gear ratio VLD10 reel. Any reel in the 6 speed gear ratio range is going to work really good. And then I like to use for the 1.5 15-pound test, 2 20-pound tests. 15-pound if I'm trying to get a little bit deeper down to like 5-foot range, and then 20-pound test if I'm really trying to just hit that 2 to 3-foot range with those baits, and I'm not really worried about having to get down deeper. As far as the wake bait, usually I'm just going to use 20-pound test. I like to keep those baits pretty high up there. You can use 15-pound test too. Red Label for both of them is generally what I like to fish with. It's cheap and it's just really strong line, so I really like it. But that is the tackle for both of those. Let me know in the description below, do you agree with these choices? Do you throw a crankbait during the spawn? I really want to get your guys' perspective as to how effective this category of baits is when the fish are on the bed. So if you guys are interested in supporting Sonar Fishing, there's a lot of different ways you can support this channel. #1, you can ask questions, which helps me come up with content. I constantly do videos on questions that I get from viewers just like you, and so drop a comment below. Another way is, of course, hit that subscribe button and share these videos. If you do enjoy this content, that just helps keep me motivated. And then finally, if you're looking to purchase any of the products that I talk about in this video, make sure you hit the links in the description. They're my affiliate links. They bring you to 44tackle.com. You get 10% off of your order, and you also help support this channel. So all those ways are great ways to support Sonar Fishing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you trust the process, and I'm going to see you out on the water.